It's time for another session of Watch Paul Write Bugs. Um, Welcome to the Mythruna weekly live stream. Tonight we'll be talking about integrating some basic AI. I'll go over some like first principles that I think of when I think of artificial intelligence, quote unquote, which is actually a poor name. I think we'll talk about that maybe a little bit too. So without further ado, let me just verify that we're streaming. Yes, it looks like we're streaming. Currently no viewers. That's okay. We'll get started anyway. Hopefully this will be informational. So thanks to my patrons again. It does mean a lot, especially coming up on the end of the year when there's a lot of expenses and stuff. It's really nice to have that little bit of offset. So I really super appreciate you guys. And anybody who would like to support what we have going on here, then the address is there. It's also in the doobly-doo of this video. All right, so without any further preamble, excuse me, let's go ahead and get started. I'll talk a little bit about what I did already. So we'll pull up Blender for a second. We can see I've got my little pen duck thing that I used to call a pen duck, and then now he's colored. I think I'm going to call him a gaefen. Sometimes I just pull random syllables together after looking around different languages and stuff, and until I can come up with like a translation for Mythruna lore and words for the different races and stuff, that I just mostly pull them out of my butt. But he's got eyes, nose, mouth. I tried to do something weird. I spent a lot of time playing with trying to come up with sort of a base color here that then could be recolored based on different zones. This is the wings, so that you could give different colors, and I kind of followed that pattern here, but I kind of forgot that that's not really what I originally wanted to do. I did want a map like this that would pick different textures, but I did not want to have created a base like this. The idea would be that I'd create different colored textures, and then we could blend between them with one of those zone map things, but that didn't work out. Anyway, I think he looks okay, and he certainly looks okay for now. And so we'll go over real quickly. I'll show. Oh yeah, so let's talk about the corn. Let's brief sidetrack through the corn. There's a high full screen. It's not a good idea. Okay, anyway, that's not what I wanted to do anyway. Sorry if that wigged everything out. Hopefully we're still streaming. So no full screen. We want to go 16 by 9. Right now I have it set up to have rendered the atlases, so we got these weird angles. But you can see these are actual 3D models that I used to create the atlases, and eventually those will be in the game. And for those who don't know, an atlas is kind of like it's an image just like this, and then we pull different parts of the image for different things, and you can see we'll see them in the game. I've implemented the Atlas version, which is just textured billboards, because they will do for now, and there's a special thing I want to do where we work on LOD, level of detail, but they needed a default way to render, and it turned out that the billboards look pretty good, and so we'll just leave them for now. So if we go into the world real quick, you guys can see the thing I was taking screenshots of and posting to Twitter. And we'll definitely bump the lighting up. Okay, so we see we've got all these, and so see even in these are just flat images that we see. You can see, and I get up close, they've got poor resolution and everything. So these are just flat images, and they already look pretty good. So you can imagine if everything that was close to us was real geometry, this would look pretty great, and you can make some pretty cool corn mazes and stuff. But now that brings us to what our next thing is. Now we've got some crops. They don't grow or anything. That's another thing I have to work out. But actually, art in general just always takes 4 times longer. There's Paul's law. Art always takes you 4 times longer than you expect, even when you consider Paul's law. So just keep that in mind. So next thing, we need some chicken to run around and eat this corn, right? And that's where we are tonight. And so let's talk a little bit about AI first principles according to me. First of all, it's artificial intelligence, right? Not very intelligent. So I don't like that term. I mean, I use AI because everyone knows what I mean, but it's basically just autonomous agents. They might not even necessarily move. You could imagine a statue that still has some kind of interaction with the world that it does at certain times and stuff. These are just basically autonomous agents, and that could go from the simplest thing to just a bird flying in the sky in the distance that doesn't actually do anything to a full up NPC that can have conversations with you. So we're talking about basically autonomous agents. And the first principles, yeah, they have to be able to interact with the world, right? They have to be able to do stuff, otherwise they're not very useful. Maybe they don't do stuff, but they have to be able to do stuff, right? They have to if they're mobile, they have to be able to navigate around, right? Move, and some kind of perception, like what's in the world. Right? These are all things. So this one's pretty straightforward, and it's totally implementation specific, but you need to keep in mind that you have this requirement. Hey, Ron. You need to keep in mind that you have this requirement. If you're developing an interface for your autonomous agents, you need to start thinking about how they will interact with the world. Do they interact with it exactly the same way as the player? Do you imagine them, pressing keys and stuff? Probably not. So in Mythruna, I already have a scripting, so actions and things that they can run. They'll execute those similar to the way the player does, although maybe they'll have their own special set. Perception is the really complicated one. This is where things get really interesting. One of the places where things get into poll versus events. Let's actually give ourselves some room here, right? Polling versus events, they both have their positives and negatives, right? Polling implies that every AI will get some periodic cycle that, polling implies periodic cycle for every agent. So if you have 50 agents nearby the player, all doing stuff, and you need to poll just to see what's going on, that's basically, you're using up all that CPU just to do that every time when maybe nothing has happened. Events have their negative side too. Events imply lots of garbage. If the classic example was, that Netcare application I used to show with all the chickens running around, I used an event-based model for that, and I believe that in this case the event-based model is best, and I'll describe why. But every time those chickens moved within each other, that was a movement event, and so there's just all these events flying around, and you need to take care that you're generating garbage for good purpose, especially since a lot of times the big problem with events, you probably move this out of the way, the big problem with events in general is that you deliver events to something that might not care, so you need to kind of manage that. And so perception, there's two things about there's different kinds of filtering that you need, and that kind of comes from the massive amount of events that come through, but you need filtering probably just by a perception bubble at minimum, basically how far away things are from the mob, autonomous agents, mobs, sometimes mobs, mobile objects. So you have a perception bubble. You may have just general kinds of perception limits. These start to get into implementation specific stuff, but I want to mention them. So things could be obscured, hidden, unavailable, different things that your specific game or the specific game may have, behind a door, behind a wall, or maybe there's some skill where you can hide in plain sight, that kind of thing. All these things would have to factor into your perception, and this is one of the reasons that. Well, so the other thing is that probably, as far as events go, the game engine's probably already generating events. The physics engine's generating contact events. If you extend that to some kind of perception bubble, the physics engine could be telling you when your perception bubble is broken by other objects. So the game is probably already generating a ton of events. The other thing is that potentially when you talk about filtering and perception bubbles, perception limits, there's an implication that there's calculations done to determine perception. They can be shared. So if you know that you have these active NPCs or mobs in a particular area, you can calculate reachability and all kinds of other things, on a world basis, so that you have some kind of mapping. This is all implementation specific, but my point is that this can happen where you have a shared state where that mob A can see mob B and mob A cannot see mob C, or the player, and so on. And you may already be calculating this for other reasons. For example, in Mythruna, we will definitely be calculating it on behalf of the player just to know what sounds they can hear and other things. So these are all shared, and polling would potentially have to calculate that every time or tap into that shared state, whereas events could potentially nip the event in the bud before it even gets any further. An NPC makes a noise, you already know no other NPCs can see that. You don't even have to bother generating the event. It never even has to get sent, that kind of thing. I just feel like events are probably better, even though anybody who's dealt with any of my AI, my UI stuff, my user interface stuff, will hear me argue the exact opposite, that events are wasteful, blah, blah, blah. And I still believe that, but in this case, I think it's worthwhile, just because of all the other calculations that happen. So we need to start thinking about what events, so what event types, and this is implementation specific, but for example, a common one is the heartbeat, right? New encounter, you've run into some object, something blocks your path blocked. These kinds of events that you can expand or whatever as you need, but there needs to be some kind of events, right? Even if it's just player activated me, that kind of thing, right? At minimum, your autonomous agent, your agent needs to be able to receive some kind of events. And the big one, navigate and move. And this is where things really start to get interesting, and you definitely need to be able to do it, but we really start to venture into implementation specific. You need it, but it's needed, right? If anything moves, it's going to be needed. And where I mean implementation specific, do you use a steering behavior, strictly, versus strictly path following, or some combination of those, right? And the thing that's weird about pathfinding, so pathfinding starts to overlap with goal action planning. There's an argument that can be made that if you're already going to be doing goal-oriented action planning, GOAP, that pathfinding is very similar to, depending on how advanced your goal-oriented action planning system is, pathfinding is very similar to that. You know, you have some goal to reach. What are the intermediate steps I need to get to that goal, and what are the intermediate steps I need to go there? Most basic GOAP implementations are not that advanced. They don't keep tracks of layers of state, which you would need to for pathfinding, but it does start to overlap, and you start to feel like, you know, goals, interim steps, destination, you know, and yeah, actions to get there, etc. So general, like some combination of those, right? Steering behaviors to follow a path is what Mythruna will use, and the path are goals, right? Follow path or reach goals. That's probably what Mythruna will use. So you need to think about how the AI will initiate this thing. Will it say, I want to go to this spot, or I want to follow this thing, or does it really operate at some really low level where it's just impulse forward, turn left, impulse forward? Probably not. In order to reason about things, you need to be able to break them up into layers, and so usually you have, you know, decisions, planning that feeds some kind of steering. I don't like it when it does that. Feeds steering, right? Steering primitives. Follow. Well, let's use classic names, right? Pursue. Arrive. Evade. There's some standard kind of steering primitives that you end up implementing. So that's like the very, very basics. Now, where Mythruna gets weird is that I need to start thinking about level of detail. Mythruna specific stuff for an infinite world. So level of detail. So, you know, active AI versus totally passive AI, and something between those. So from a oh my gosh, we've already got spammers in the thing, huh? All right. So they go away. All right, we've got 5 concurrent viewers. Welcome everybody. So we'll get into some graphical stuff there in a second, right? So I want to talk about this level of detail because that's where things get really complicated in Mythruna. You know, so in the basic case, you know, agents near player, classic pattern, AI fully active, fully interacts with the world. Okay, then you've got agents that are out of sight. These guys can cheat. They don't necessarily need to follow paths. Don't necessarily need to follow strict paths. Can skip goals, actions, potentially. The idea being that if you know that George the blacksmith every day walks from, you know, his forge to the tavern to go get lunch, and then when he's done lunch he walks back to his forge to go back to work. If the player is not within eyesight of that, you have to run the idea that Joe walks from one place to another, but you don't actually have to have him walk there. You just need to know what state things are in when the player can see. So if Joe walks into the player's view, you need to have Joe instantiate and start doing fully interactive stuff. But when the player can't see it, it's okay to assume, well, it can be okay to assume that the actions proceed. It's one way to cheat, right? You didn't have to follow all the individual footsteps to get there with potentially the cart of cabbage in the way and had to go around that, and you could just assume he figured all that out. He got to his work, he got to the tavern. As long as the player can't see it, let's let the town go ahead and do the town stuff. And then the extreme example of that, one could argue, is not even AI anymore, and that's the fully passive AI. Things so far away that the player is unlikely to see or unlikely to see any effects. And in Mythruna, this is going to be very common, faraway towns. So, faraway towns, that you're not even visiting, but they still have stuff that goes on. There's the idea that the blacksmith is still going to work every day. These are more of, and I did take notes on this part. Yeah, so far away. So in the long term, they might see that. So, far AI is not really AI. It's just kind of event schedules, spreadsheets, encounter tables. Right, we know things are happening at a time. Joe goes to lunch every day. In general, the town has to have certain things happen. Trade still has to happen in or out. So what I have my notes here say, citizens of a town, are assumed to live their daily lives, keep the town balanced. If something gets damaged, it gets fixed. You just assume these things that when the player finally does encounter the town, when the player does show up, you need to be able to interpolate the state at that time. So that's kind of where the encounter tables come up. You could be simulated entirely with encounter tables. It's just not very interesting in the long run. If every time you show up to the town, it just figures out where everybody should be based on the time of day. Random encounter tables. But in Mythruna, the towns will kind of know who lives there already, even before you show up. And so there's this idea that you show up and they've been doing their thing for a long time. And there's the other idea that I really want to get done where, if the blacksmith's house gets damaged, then somehow the town works to repair that. There's like a budget where they, either the blacksmith does it or somebody does it. But if you were to leave the town and come back a month or two later, his house would be fixed, that kind of thing. That's super advanced stuff far down the line, but that's what we need to think about when we're talking about this kind of level of detail. But at any rate, I believe in the short term I can just deal with the sort of dumb way, which is agents are always near the player, and when they're not, you just turn them off. But I need to start thinking about these things right from the beginning. But these all start to venture into like the we're sort of getting out of the first principle stuff, right? We're in the implementation specific. And the other things that other implementation specific decisions, not first principles, the type of AI, right? Is it a finite state machine versus behavior trees? There's any number of these, goal-oriented action planning. These kind of all, and so on. Or maybe some combination of all of those, right? These are decisions that a game would have to make, and I'm probably going to be using some combination of all of those. And like does a mob or an agent, let's call it an agent, does they have emotions? Just hunger, thirst, fatigue, HTF means something to me, hunger, thirst, fatigue. Do they have skills, traits? This is all implementation specific stuff. Mythruna, of course, will try to have all of those things in my mind. And then, do you have, heavily scripted AI versus, totally dynamic planning? Probably some combination of those for Mythruna, right? and the simplest AI has little to no memory, right? It does no planning, essentially ignores most events, but it would still need to move through the world, perform actions that might modify the world, and receive minimal feedback about the success failure of that. At minimum, if you have a bird spawn in a tree and that bird sees you and flies away, you've had an interaction that required events. It required, perception. Yeah, so it required event perception. It required action that the bird had to like fly. These kind of different things. And maybe it made a sound when it did that. That's sort of the minimum you need. And man, I've just talked 20 minutes about AI first principles. So when I started messing with that netcare demo where the chickens were running around, I had like actors and I was still struggling with a lot of this. Do they poll for the things they need? They definitely will need to, right? So we talk about this polling versus events. Even if you are event-based, the behaviors will need to query the world just to make decisions about stuff, right? If you decide you want to go in the house, you may, decide to see if the door is open or closed, right? You need to. That's not an event. That's not something happening to you. You need to be able to query the world. And so, I had this idea that there's actor interface and trying to define what the actor can do or what things can do to the actor and so on. And I straddled the line in a potentially unproductive way. And while I got things to work, there were some things was really unhappy with. So I do plan to go back through this netcare code and see, we had the mob driver, which was, that's sort of the physics driver that steers it. And all these different things. I plan to go back through this and like throw out the things I didn't like, and that's why this first principles document here was as much for me as it was just, I thought maybe you guys could see my process of kind of narrowing down what are the things we absolutely need, what starts to venture into the implementation specific. Because if you can talk about what first principles are, sometimes that helps you make decisions. Like, you need this, you can't get away from having it, so don't try to work around it. Just go ahead and go with it. So what do we try to get done tonight? And I guess if anybody has any questions about any of that spewing of random autonomous agent crap, just let me know. But we'll go over to the rigger tool. I think initially we're going to have to rig the little bird guy, the burb. So some of you may have already played with this tool before. That's where I had put a version out where you could load fade up. Oh, she's wearing her underwear. So you could load fade up and play with her clothes and stuff like that. Let's turn this off. And you could, but I used this tool originally to sort of define her colliders. So she's got a root sphere that keeps her rooted to the ground, and she's got sort of a body sphere which keeps her from being able to walk through fences and things, and sort of the minimal collision shapes that we needed. If somebody throws something at her head, it'll bounce off her head. But then she has like arms and feet, so that when she's walking, maybe she kicks stuff, or she can't put her feet through things when she's walking around. And so we're going to need to do something similar for the chicken, or the gaefen, right? So it's this little guy. He's doing his idle animation. I think he's kind of cute. But we probably want him in the default pose, right? And so at minimum, I think that he's the right size. Because the other thing is, before we do this, we want to make sure he's the right height. And you guys can't see this, but I'm taking my fingers and I'm kind of laying him down. I think he's more than 1 meter tall here, which is... What we will do is, let's talk about this tool. The rigger tool, while this is the Mythruna specific instantiation of that, the rigger tool itself is in the open source stuff. And if we find, there's no way to like create a rig from scratch, but you can, in the tool, but you can create these, description files, and that's what I've done. So it talks about what the model is, the original Pinkin model that I developed. The other thing is, I started to realize that if my paths get too long, then then I can't load the things properly. So anyway, keep short paths. But anyway, when we load this one, whenever it loads it, it calls this retexture script because I wanted to replace the basic color map that was in Blender with the combined color map that I just made to get this done. But in here, I want to see what the scale of the thing, oops. So before we do all that, can I log? Or just print line? Let's print line the bounds of the model, right? Model, see, I had another one. The female rig also rescaled. Yeah, here we go. So just cut and paste that. So we'll see what the root bound is. So if we open it again, should run that script. And root bounds, it is just under 1 meter tall, so it's the right height. So you basically the y extent means you doubled that, so 0.49 times 2. And I looked at birds and chickens and things, and I wanted something that could fit through single block doors, and chickens and roosters and stuff. Turkeys for sure can get up to be about 1 meter tall, so that seemed reasonable. So bottom line is the gaefen is the height it should be. And before we started making collision shapes and stuff, it's useful to know. So what we want probably is one round collision shape here, and then a bubble for the head. I don't know if I'm going to model anything else because we potentially will have a lot of these, and I don't want to create extra work for the physics engine if it doesn't need it. So we'll create a new collider. And this is the, that's funny, it automatically created one for the butt. Okay, so, we want the root, and, yep, the shape is a sphere, and we'll scale it up to something that looks about the size of the thing, and then we'll offset it so that it just touches the ground. So that should be about right. But we'll want to move it back a little bit. I think that's C, yeah. So we'll move it back a little bit and then scale it up a little bit more. Oops. Oh, well, let me go any higher. Alright, well, I might end up having to... That's interesting. I must have limited it to 0.25. Okay. Well, then maybe we will create a neck for this. What I don't want is... these are the collision shapes that the physics engine will use to decide if the bird can walk through things, right? And if I have a ball up here on the head, which, why don't we go ahead and add that so I can talk about this a little bit. So we have a ball on the head, and we need to move it to be the head. And I'm going to make it a little oversized so that maybe it covers the beak a little bit. Actually, we'll move it down. So move it down like this, and forward like this. Yeah, so now when he bops his head on stuff, we'll see it. So yes, he will collide with things that aren't really touching his head, but that's okay. But now we've got this gap here, and the problem with that is, like, if you had, a chicken pen, and the fence was only this high, that chicken could walk right through that fence. So we'll at least want to probably create some kind of collider for the neck, and that's unfortunate. I was kind of hoping I could create just a bigger body, because the body could be this size and probably it wouldn't matter. But we need to neck, and I will leave this as a sphere because the spheres are way more efficient than the box colliders would be, and this will be good enough. And so now, and I'm not going to do feet for him because he's got little feet that always sit underneath him. It's unlikely to interact with other things. So we will. I'm looking at this and it kind of extends out in a way that I don't like, so I'm just going to back off that scale just a little and maybe move it back one. Yeah, so it's just inside. That should be good. Probably we want something on his wing tips. So if we change to the T-pose, right, if his wings are fully extended, we may want a couple little balls out there. So let's add a couple, so not the butt, but the shoulder, lower wing left. And I think this one we will use a block collider. So which one is it? You kind of have to look at the red, green. Actually, what I can show you is if we look at the red, green, blue, we can see the axis. I don't remember which one's which, but yeah. So the blue is the Z, and yeah, Y is green. So it's at a kind of a weird angle. And so we got green this way, or Y this way, Z this way, X this way. And so if we're creating a collider, we want it long in the Z, long in the Y, wide in the Z, short in the X. Right, so yeah. Or we don't have any blocks like that pre-made, so we will just pick the longest one. Yeah, that's fine. So well, we'll use a shorter one because it's just the wing tip itself. And this will be interesting because that scales down. Yeah, so after saying all that, I'm going to change my mind and use a sphere. And the reason is because the bird wings were really kind of weird. You can see how they're really long here, but when he's in the default pose, they get shorter, and you can see how that sphere, got short and fat. But in the physics engine, that really wouldn't happen. It would still be a sphere, and so that long cubed thing would still be hanging out long and cubed here, and it wouldn't really be right. So we will leave these pretty big, and we decided that was the X. Oh no, that's right. This is the Z. So we'll move it there, and maybe out a little bit, right? And I'll scale it down a little bit just to be a little less ridiculous. And we'll make the front side of the wing, oops, we decided this was Z. Yeah, we'll make the front side of the wing the colliding part. It's not great, but it'll be better than nothing, right? We basically want him, when he's flapping his wings around stuff, when he's doing the run animation, we want it to like hit stuff if it, right? So that's good, and we'll make another one on the other side, new, and we'll just copy that stuff over. I need to make a copy command, so we want low wing right, and what was our thing? We did 0.05, and we offset 0.09, in the Y direction. Yeah. If I really cared, I could also put like a sphere in the upper wing, but I think this will be fine. So when he's doing his run, we've got the fully extended wings. This will look better when he's moving forward really fast and making squawking noises, right? Yeah, this little idle thing. We're just going to peck the ground. Oh no, that's the eat when he pecks the ground. Burk, burk. Burk. So you see, he can already eat the corn as soon as we have that corn available for him. And yes, we went over everything. Okay, so I think he's good for now. He won't have any attachments. He can't wear clothes and backpacks and things, so we're good for there. And so I'm going to save him. It's a chick gull. Yeah, well, it's the coloring, right? But they will have different colorings. They won't all be this color. And the movement is the one. Oh yeah, I forgot. He's in his idle. So it's funny how they're off by. It's probably a bug. It's beautiful. Well, thank you. I think he's cute. So this is where I would normally set, the animation stuff up. It doesn't actually export, but you can. I think this is Z. Yeah, but you can see how he's walking. There's no way to turn off the collider balls right now, which is unfortunate. But the idea being that you can set thresholds for when he runs versus walks and make sure that the, like right now his feet are sliding. Like he's walking too slow. Like the animation is going too slow. And so you can come in here and I think it's lowering the scale. And then I think you have to get it to trigger again. And then, yeah, so you can kind of see where his feet are syncing up with the lines on the floor and see if he's, yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be tweaked there. And normally when I create a model and I animate it, I put like a conveyor belt on the floor that moves at the speed that I want him to move at, and then make sure that the feet sync up to that when I make the animation. And I didn't do that with him. I did do that with Fade when I created her. It's an old trick back from the old 3D modeling days, before any of this was really easy. So his feet are sliding along, and I don't remember exactly how to fix that. It's like the base walk, but at some point when his speed gets up to the point where it would be ridiculous to, so see, he's walking way too fast. So we need to change the threshold for when he moves into run mode. Now he's in run mode. And his animation is probably kind of fast for that. So probably he's moving along at a meter per second. Let's change this to, he would end walking at, as soon as we go in here, he starts, oh, yeah, there we go. As soon as we get over that, now he starts running. I wish I could get rid of these balls. Need a toggle. And so then he would continue doing his running up to be whatever his maximum speed was, which is current. These are all adapted from the character model for Fade, so they don't really make sense for a chicken, because at some point these gaefen, they can actually fly. I think they will be able to fly, and so he would just fly, right? And there's no fly animation. So anyway, the idea being that you could work out the walking animations and figure out what pace they needed to be for the different states of the character. So we get that. I'm going to screenshot this just so that I have those numbers later. Give me some place to start. So if we go back to rig, oh, see, he's still walking at that pace. That's kind of nice. He has a little bobbing head. Anyway, so we saved it. We compile the binary, which puts it in this rig format. I think it even puts it in the right place for Mythruna to use. So let's see if we can spend our last 15 minutes finding a way, finding a way to get it into the tool. And you guys, if you have any questions about stuff I've done so far, just post them in the chat. I know it's kind of like a lot of information real fast, and maybe you just like to hear my voice. I don't know. So when we created our when we were playing with sounds, we created this test item that we used to place fake sounds. Test object. Was that the one? Nope. It was the sound one. Okay, so we created the sound one. I'm going to steal the sound one for a second, because we had all of the stuff necessary to place a sound sound producer, and so I'm just going to co-opt that to create one of our. I think that's not the right location. We will check with we will see what we use to create fade. There it is. So we want to do something like this, only this is, where did it put it? Source main resources. Oh, that's in the block set stuff. Model set, source main resources, animals. Oops, that's not what I want to do. So, yep, gaefen rig .j30, and that's in animals. And that should be it. So we don't have any of this stuff. We don't actually have a let's do this just to save myself some trouble. If false, do the old way. Else, do this new way. And then all this stuff we don't need, we'll put in here. So we can still go back and test sounds later. But otherwise we'll just use the position that we clicked. And yeah, that's the other thing. So let's actually define a boolean. Boolean. Speakers. False. I'm a pack rat when it comes to code when that's not being committed and stuff, so you'll find I have like all these branches of weird things that I leave around. Start time, so if use speakers, we'll do this. But basically I'm just cheating because I don't want to create a whole other tool and add it to the inventory just for this. We don't need start in time. I guess we'll create an object name. Gaefen has a position and shape. It doesn't need an object type. It's not that kind of object. We don't have a sound for it. Yeah, no decay. Actually, you know what? We probably do want to decay now that I think about it. I don't have any other way to remove this object. I'm not sure I can right click on it. Alright, we ready to see what'll blow up if I do this? Let's check it out. Any of you that think that I might place a chicken and he'd actually walk around, no. I just want to see him in the world to make sure that the model loads. In fact, if I'm able to click on him and make him physical, I think he'll just fall over. But that would be fun too. That progress bar goes so fast. Someday it will not. Alright, let's give ourselves some daylight again. That's what we can do in single player. Alright. So let's find a good place. What was it complaining about? Oh yeah, it's not real complaints. Okay. Let's create the sound wand. Alright, moment of truth. I'm gonna right click. Dope! We got some errors. No such property ed. Oh, yes. Alright, well that's a stupid Paul trick. Okay, this one I told you earlier when I started this live stream. You get to watch me write bugs. In all of my Java code, I tend to have this entity data. That's the actual entity system data, right? Entity data, and I call it ed because it's always defined locally. Excuse me. And so it's just always there, and I use it, and so all this code that needs it will just pass it along. Whereas in script land, I decided to really fully write it out because this is global for all scripts, and it should be, I eventually want to make it so that users who make scripts don't have to type this at all, but in the meantime, when they do, I want it to be written out, but I always forget about that. So let's just double check that I didn't do something else stupid. Well, nothing obviously stupid anyway. So let's try again. At least it would have failed to create it, so we don't have one sitting around partially created. Do any of you on the chat use Blender at all? Are you just getting started with Blender, or are you experts? Or I've discovered some interesting tricks, and I'm sure they've been documented elsewhere, but I've just wondered if anybody has any interest in seeing some of the things I've learned on my journey. Equip. Okay, let's give us some light, because it's still nighttime. Alright, ready? Moment of truth. Why isn't the... oh, that's... okay, new bug. Okay. Shape is null. Why is shape null? I wonder if let's check one thing. There could be a case where I've hard-coded something somewhere. So let's see if we could even load fade. We know the system is capable of loading fade because we see her running around when we go into third-person mode. And of course, if you play in the network, you see other people, and they all look the same. But we know fade works, so let's just verify that all the code is functioning the way it's supposed to. And we're going to get a... I could follow her with the scalar. Yeah, it's a lot easier than it used to be, but I was in a conversation with somebody several weeks ago, and we were talking about. Um, I'm old school, and I just think there's a lot of Blender that's amazing. The 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 ability to paint with an image, while it's difficult to set up, I find that really cool. And I was in a discussion with somebody, and they were talking about, because I was saying, you can get a long way with that without having something like Substance Painter. And they pointed out that in Substance Painter you can write to all of the um, physically based rendering, and you can write to all the channels at once. Basically, you can write to your metallic, you can write to your color all at the same time, because Substance Painter, that's what it does. And I actually had not found a way to write any of those, to paint any of those in Blender, until the other day. I accidentally stumbled across how to do that, and so I thought, that's something maybe other people would be interested in knowing. Okay, so let's see if we can place a fade. Yes, okay. She's looking up at the sky. Hi, Fade. What you looking at? Oh, you're looking at the sun? You shouldn't do that. You'll go blind. That's funny. Okay, so she works, which means her legs are twisted funny. So you mainly do 3D models for... Yeah. Blender's really fun. And the rigging for the chicken went a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. I've watched enough tutorials and I've done it enough times now, it's starting to sink in that I don't need to always look at a tutorial. But it's fun. But like recently I found that you can have in the texture painting sort of got a edit mode, object mode, then go select it, and then go to texture paint. So you can have the material selected, which is why it's showing me the mix of my two different images. It's showing me, that's the coloring, and that's the base. And I found you can actually paint to either one, which is really kind of cool. And just have the material selected, and these are blended in the material using nodes. And so I think it's just really neat. You can have any number of your images pulled in here, and be able to paint to them and stuff. I just thought it was kind of a cool trick. And even though they're all combined in the shader nodes and stuff. All right, so there's definitely an issue with somewhere I've hard-coded some path of code that says, oh, if it's the human female rig, do this thing, otherwise we don't know what to do. And I believe that's going to be in the model view state, because that is where we complained about it. So let's look for human. Oh, nope. That's spatial factory, maybe. So model view state doesn't actually create anything. It calls some kind of factory spatial factory. Is there something hard coded in here? No. So where are we hard coded? I might actually have to read. Alright, so I didn't save that. I didn't save that stack trace. So let's just look for a second. Somewhere here is a create model. Yeah, create model. It's an instance of rig shape. So we've already gotten past that. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so we'll go with the brute force approach. Find dash name star.java xargs grep command line junkie human. I put quotes around it. I didn't need to, but I was going to originally do human female, and so going through all my Java code to find the word human. See if I've hard coded her somewhere. I'd like to at least get a stationary chicken in the... So set shape, execute this in the background. It calls create model. With the shape factory create shape, which should have created the shape. Is this really the shape factory? I think it is. Shape factory registry. It's a different. That's the. Yeah, shape registry builder, I bet, has something hard coded in there. Let us check. Where's that world? No. Mythruna shape. Shape factory registry builder. Oops. Rig shape factory. Somebody's hard coding it, but I don't see. Well, I mean, I could be just doing it wrong. That's the other thing. So let's look for human female rig. .rig. Oh, .rt. No. Yeah, it's the RT is the. Okay. So then just verify main resources rigs human. Is there an animals? Yes. Gaefen rig.rt. So this is just creating the .rig. Nobody's creating the .rt. And we don't see this anywhere in the Java code. Well, let me make sure I'm not doing something really, really stupid. Sorry, guys. It's always something. While that's doing its thing, let's get the error again. Thing is, the error was just saying it couldn't find the model, and that could be for any number of reasons. I don't know who's failing, but I kind of feel like I hard-coded something to get Fade to work back in the day, and it's biting me now. Past Paul does that kind of thing. Yeah, when I watch back these videos to put the chapters in, I'm always like, I really should have brightened it, because whenever it's dark. Okay, so Fade did not get created. Yeah, null pointer exception, which we got. So null pointer exception in the spatial factory line 55. Spatial factory 55. Yeah, it's just trying to get the shape. And so when we called create model, we didn't even have provided a shape, which meant that I'm trying to be working for future me. Yeah, I do too, but sometimes past me had to take shortcuts just to get something done. Oh, we got the whole stack trace here. I could actually just trace it back. So we called it from line 504. which is this one. That's because it was not an instance of rig shape, so we already had failed to load. Well, at least somebody. Good Friday night, I guess, eh? So we'd already failed to not. We still didn't have the shape by here, which meant 705. This is where we fail. The shape is not found for that shape info. And shape factory is a shape factory registry which we created from the game session. So shape registry builder. Where did that come from? Shape, which we were just over there. Shape registry builder. Client registry. So we create the registry. We had a sphere factory. Rig shape factory. Let me just double check. Yes, see that's in one of the test apps. That's fine. Where's rig shape factory? That's I think in the shared code. No. We're getting closer. Aha! We have hard-coded something over here. Create shape. Okay, so if we look for so we created the human female, blah 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 blah. We tried to create the did I screw something up in the shape name? But I looked at that like 5 times, because that's like a mistake I make all the Yep, that's what it was. Gotta use the right extension. And I have not been drinking, other than Pepsi. It's always important that if you're going to make a mistake on a live stream, that it be a really stupid one. Especially if you checked for it. Now, it should have created these already, and other than the fact that they're decaying, we might actually see them. Because they should have hung around for 32 seconds each. Nope. Alright. Let's load that again. Equip. Okay, moment of truth. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yay! Oh. Hey, but it loaded in the default pose. That's kind of cool. But we couldn't find the texture. Probably needs to be copied somewhere. But hey, we got closer. Alright, let's take the 2 minutes longer to fix the texture problem. I think this burb is going to disappear before we come back. But where did we put... I think that... Let's redo this grep. Whoa. So it created the rig RT. File set, source, main resources, rigs. What does the human one look like? Nothing there. And so, where did we put her textures? Okay. It should have the texture. I don't know why it doesn't have the texture. Oops. Okay, that's the old one. Let's check. Cannot locate texture. Animals. Ooh, it's 2 slashes. Where did the double slash come from? Aha. Let us look at the file. Maybe I've got a typo in the rig file. So in here, we end the animals with the thing with fade. It does not. That's what it is. So we add an extra slash in. I should really, you know, help future me along and fix these kind of bugs. Well, they're not bugs, but make it easier to not make mistakes. Now we will get the texture. And the Pepsi's gone. So load this up. We gotta re-export it. Save, compile binary. And let's run it. Moment of truth. We're way over time. All right, let's continue last world. Bird disappeared from before. That's fine. I expected it. Alright. Select our tool. And place the bird. Yay! It's got texture! Woohoo! Nice. Is it physical? Nope. Of course not. Right click on it? Nope. Can't right click. Oh, I can. Ooh. Nice. I think you can only right click on the places that have colliders. No. Interesting. Alright, well, the bird works. Here. Delete like that too. Cool. Alright, now I just have to get him to walk around. That's no big deal, right? That's, yeah, more than I could do in a live stream. So anyway, we got the bird to appear. They're all going to eat the corn. Armies of birds. They're in the corn. Oh no. My corn crop. Sort of an ominous looking army of gaefen. It's funny. Well, let me drag it around. Oh, I can drag them around too. That's awesome. I don't know why that one showed up so dark. That's hilarious. They're disappearing as they time out because they have a decay set on them. Yeah, look at them go. Doot, 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 doot. Okay, well, cool guys. We got something done. Long AI discussion. Couple burbs placed around the ground. Gaefen. And we can run around in the corn maze. Yeah, I get stuck between the corn. All right, well, thanks for joining me. Hopefully it was entertaining on some level, watching me write bugs and stuff. And this weekend, I'm going to try to get at least minimal AI implemented so that the bird can walk around. I wanted to get the tool swinging this week, but I'm like between corn and this, they just took way more time. You know, Paul's law, 4 times longer than you expect, to get these, you know, the corn and the thing working. And the corn doesn't even grow yet. I really wanted to like plant it and grow, but we'll get there. Every new hard thing I do is one less hard thing I have to do. And anyway, that's, you know, how the game development goes sometimes. So thank you for joining me. I don't really have anything else to talk about. I don't know if anybody's actually interested in ever seeing this document. It's kind of like random notes, but if you are, you know, let me know. I'll post it somewhere. Otherwise, we'll hit the thanks screen. You know, thanks for watching, everybody. It's always fun when there's some comments going on in the thread over there, and always a good time. And again, thanks to my patrons. And if you would like to just join us on Discord and you aren't already, you know, find a way to contact me either on Twitter or, you know, Mythruna forums, or I am also pspeed at simsilica.com if you want to get me there. And you know, thanks Ginger Root. And I guess I will see you guys next week, and hopefully I'll have like lots of cool AI things to say. Maybe we can revisit this document and I can talk about what I actually got done. And anyway, thanks for joining, and I will see you guys next time. Go forth, be productive, have a great weekend, do something cool, post screenshots. I always like to see screenshots.